Hello and welcome to the April 2016 Getting Started with CyVerse webinar. I'm Jason Williams, coming to you from Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, New York. Welcome. This webinar is a 1-hour presentation that we give every month, and it's designed to be a sort of getting started guide, a way for our new users, the approximately 600 or 700 new users that sign up every month, to get acquainted with some of the tools, services, features that CyVerse will enable. We know a lot, and I saw in the survey a moment ago, of our users sign up via word of mouth. Maybe someone in your lab or another colleague has told you about CyVerse. So this is a chance firsthand to get your questions answered and to have a few short demos that really will help you get started with your science. Before I actually go into the presentation, let me familiarize you with some of the features of this Adobe Connect webinar. One of the first things is that this whole thing is recorded. So within a day or so, this will be posted to YouTube. So if you miss anything, please don't worry. You'll be able to go ahead and view the entire presentation. And also, if you have others that you want to share this with, that's great. You can forward the link, and then others will be able to watch the exact same program. Okay, so in the Adobe Connect itself, the window that you're viewing, beneath the window, very importantly, is actually a place for you to ask questions. So off to the side, I can see your questions, and at any time, please go ahead and send me your questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. That's one of the benefits of attending the live session. Additionally, on the side of the window there, you'll see some features. You can download the presentation. There's some important links that you can visit, and those are there anytime. You can go ahead and click on those. On the screen itself, so as you're viewing the video, if you move your mouse onto the screen, you should be able to adjust the quality, the resolution. So if you're on a connection which is not that great, you can choose to lower the connection speed, and then you'll be able to deal with a lower speed connection. Also, at the top of the bar there, I believe you'll also see these 4 little arrows, and you can actually make this full screen. And that's going to be important for when I do some of the demos from my computer. You'll be able to get a little bit of a better view doing it that way. All right, so the way that the presentation for the webinar starts is with about 10 minutes about an overall view of what the CyVerse project is about. There are really lots of moving pieces. There's a little bit of history. We want to take you through all of that so you really know what the overall aims of the project are, because the aims of the project are much larger than any one individual piece of the technology. And then we'll go ahead and give you a couple of demos, how to move, transfer, upload, share data, how to use our web interface, the discovery environment, in order to share your data, to work with different analyses, and to see the history of what you've done. We'll also be working in the cloud, showing you the Atmosphere system, where you can actually launch virtual machines and do your computing in a cloud format. So we'll talk about that and get you exposed to those things. So first, let me begin the presentation. And again, remind you, if you have any questions anytime, please just go ahead and chat those to me at the bottom. The overall vision of the project is to transform science through data-driven discovery. And that mission means deploying a national cyber infrastructure for life science research. Over the past several years, we've gotten more than 30,000 users, petabyte of data, hundreds of publications. So I'll define exactly what cyber infrastructure is, but what it allows you to do, and the access it gives you, is to be able to do your science more efficiently, to do bigger projects, to challenge bigger questions. In fact, the evolution of the project, starting back in 2008 when we were called iPlant, until recently, was empowering new plant biology. The project in its first 5 years was successful enough to merit being funded again, and so in 2013 we became really a cyber infrastructure for life science. And then just as recently as this January, we announced a rebranding to really emphasize that our mission is data-driven discovery for all of life sciences. So what that means and how we're funded are really important for our users to understand. The first part of that, the funding, is that we're actually funded entirely by the National Science Foundation. So we're your colleagues and we're your collaborators. We don't have a product to sell, so to speak. We really are interested in helping and working with you. The entire platform and all the resources are entirely available to the community. In fact, it's open source. We have users across the world. And we also like it when you cite us. So please also think about acknowledging CyVerse when you use the resources. To go back to that term I used earlier, cyber infrastructure, in one sense, it's nothing you're not already familiar with. Data storage, software, high performance computing, and especially, I'd like to say, people. But it's organizing these different elements into a system that really lets you challenge yourself to answer questions of size and scope that otherwise you really wouldn't be able to do. So one of the things that I could summarize that just sort of in everyday language or in the way that I really am proud of is when we have our users and we meet them at a conference or we talk to them or see their publications, and they really let us know that they wouldn't have been able to do this type of project without the resources. So what I hope to introduce you to in the next few minutes is really what those resources are about and how you can make use of them. So summarizing that and moving on, because I don't want to spend a lot on the history and the details going backward, but it's platforms, tools, and data sets, storage and compute, and training and support. And in fact, today is an example of the training and support element. Just to emphasize, we support all domains of life science. So if you're working with plants, animals, microbes, biomedical data, ecological data, CyVerse is built for data. So we really are able to support projects in all of these domains of life science. And it's really apropos because as we get more sophisticated, we find that our science may need to cross several domains, and so that shouldn't have to mean that you as a user need to do one piece of your project here, one piece of your project somewhere else. You incur a penalty for that, moving your data, familiarizing yourself with new tools. So we try to really have a unified platform that supports everything in this sort of scope. To take a quick look at the product stack, this chart summarizes at different levels, and really it's important to show that because we have different levels of users. The majority of our users are what I would somewhat call the bench biologists, kind of like myself, where we spend most of our time at the bench, and then we also need to do some analyses. But we also have many users who are bioinformaticians and who work very heavily at developing systems, scripts, and so at the top layer there's everything from our cloud compute and discovery environment, the web interface, many of these products, which I'll summarize in a moment. Beneath that are various services like identity management and authorization, the data store itself, which unifies all of these things, and at the lowest level, the actual systems. So we really bring an entire stack. And depending upon your interests, if you're not purely just doing biology, but if you're actually working with bioinformatics, even developing systems, you can access just about all of these items as a user, whether you're using it at the level of a web interface or the level of the API. So it's really flexible, and it's really gives the user the ability to customize things according to what they would like to do. Historical element here to just sort of talk about how was CyVerse built. It really was built with the idea of community input and community cleverness. We were never going to just sort of have a philosophy of we build it and they'll come, but that what the user wants is what we're working for. And that's important today because you may find things that you'd like us to do that we haven't done yet. And so it's important for you to communicate that and give feedback, and we'll talk about that. The priorities for the community when we first started out in 2008 are very similar to what we are interested in today. So when you come to CyVerse, you'll find tools for everything from reference-guided assemblies, RNA-seq, ChIP-seq. There's a whole bunch of things. Really, I think it's clear that genomic data continues to be the big driver between big data and biology, but it's more than that. So we have tools and platforms from everything from phylogenetics to GWAS. So there are a whole bunch of priorities, and if you check our website, you can actually see where we are with various products, whether things are in planning, in place, in progress. Nothing's ever finished in that it's done, but it's always evolving, always being updated. But again, the community helps us to determine what those priorities are. CyVerse collaborates with many different platforms and projects. We're not the only game in town, certainly. So our solution is always to collaborate, and we're always interested in that. And these are just some of the different projects that we have collaborations with or connections to. And those aren't just on the level of we know the folks that work at a project, but very often at the level that it makes it easy for you as a user to move your data, your resources, your science between different projects, because we have already on the back end sort of made some of these things work nicely together. Another important thing about us is that we're multiple institutions. So the primary institutions at CyVerse are the University of Arizona, the University of Texas Austin, where we have the Texas Advanced Computing Center, Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, and UNC Wilmington. So these are the institutions which really make up CyVerse. It's a completely virtual organization, and each one of the institutions brings different resources and perspectives. The other thing I want to mention and highlight is that CyVerse is not just one organization. So in fact, the folks in the UK, as we had built collaborations with them, acquired their own funding and became iPlant UK. So that itself is a BBSRC funded organization or consortium of 3 universities and also the Genome Analysis Center. So again, we are very open to collaboration, and we really have everything in such a way that people can come in and take what they like. In fact, that's sort of my next slide. We think of ourselves as almost being the Lego blocks of cyber infrastructure, that you can take what you want and leave the rest. So we've really built those elements that you need to put together your project. Maybe we have 85, 95% of what you like, and then the last 5% will always be something custom, but you can really put together the pieces in a way that works for you. Okay, so that was a little bit of the history. Let me quickly get very practical, and then we'll actually do some demos. So here are some of the key products that all the users would like them to be familiar with. Unfortunately, I only have time to do demos on just a few of them, really the first 3 or so, but you should know a little bit about them. So for the data store, this is the service that actually allows us to, or the user, to store their data. Every user has a 100 gigabyte allocation. If you need more than that, that's absolutely possible. There is automated data backup. We've made it easy to upload, download, and share. So you have that as a resource. The discovery environment is our web interface, and it allows you to run almost any bioinformatics application without the command line. So if you're not used to working on a Linux system and doing things at the command line level, you can certainly use a discovery environment to use those applications. It's interfaced with our high-performance computing and the data store, and it's also extensible. So if you have applications you want to bring to CyVerse that weren't previously there, you can either put them in yourself or you can work with us to get those in. Atmosphere is our cloud computing resource. I still find that many biologists aren't too familiar with cloud computing, or at least cloud computing as it pertains to biology, so we'll get a little bit of an explanation of what that is. If you are familiar, there's several hundred virtual machine images that you can use, and it's very flexible, so you can customize how you'd like to work in there, image your own resources, and share those with anyone else that you'd like to share. The APIs allow you to actually programmatically access the data and the resources and to share those. DNA Subway, which we won't have time to demo, is our educational interface. So if you're working in the classroom and you'd like to make bioinformatics available there, that is a fantastic way to combine not only bioinformatics tools, but in many cases, wet lab resources or experiments where everything is documented and you can actually do a lot of classroom bioinformatics. BISC is our image analysis management platform. In fact, if you're really interested in working with tons of image data, it handles several hundred image formats. There is a webinar, I believe, 2 days from now. So check out the CyVerse website and you will get a really thorough introduction to the capabilities of BISC. Okay, so that was my background. Please let me remind you again, at the bottom, if you have questions, just let me know. More than happy to take those. Again, that's the advantage of doing it live. Right now, what we're going to do is 3 demos. We're going to talk about moving and sharing data. We're going to do some sample analyses in the discovery environment, our web interface, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about how to use the Atmosphere cloud. I'll also remind you, as I'm going to do these demos from my computer, now might be a good time to go ahead and click those little 4 arrows at the top of the screen and make it full screen so you can see a little bit better. Some things get a little small on the computer screen. Okay, so let's get started. Getting data into CyVerse. So I've mentioned the CyVerse data store. You can store any type of file related to your research. You can move those data between the different CyVerse platforms. There's ways to automate. There's ways to share those files with your lab members, collaborators, communities. So it really is quite powerful. Even in this demo, I really won't be able to show you everything, but at least some of the basics. So there are multiple ways to access the data store itself. The first, in fact, I'm going to show you all of them. The first two are the sort of point and click, which are CyberDuck and the discovery environment. And then there's also the command line. So I'll demonstrate a little bit of all of those to get you started. In the discovery environment, you have access to uploading and downloading small files. You can also work with some larger files, but really the CyberDuck is better for doing that. You can import from URLs. So for many of your day-to-day smaller needs, it's great, but there are some size and speed limitations. The CyberDuck tool is really a great all-purpose solution. So CyberDuck is not a tool that we built, but it's a tool that we use, and that really is almost like a Dropbox, if you will. It allows you to drag and drop files between your local system and also the CyVerse data store. iCommands, if you are used to working at the command line, you have everything that you'd expect. So you have full flexibility over your file transfers, the ability to script and automate, and also working from your whatever terminal, whatever server your data may be stored on. Okay, so let's go ahead and give you a quick demo to those things. And I'll also remind you that all of these things are going to be posted in the recording. So if anything you miss out on, don't worry too much, we'll be able to get that to you. First, let me go ahead and open up the CyVerse homepage and just show you a little bit of some of the things you may need. So if you go to CyVerse.org, maybe one of the first things you might want to go to is the help section. That will give you a link actually to some of the tools that you can do for help, including the CyVerse Learning Center. If you go through here, one of the first links is about how do you manage your actual data. So when you click on that link, Managing Data, it really covers all of the things I'm about to talk to, including the documentation. So when you go here to CyberDuck, you can actually click there and it'll take you to the instructions for working with CyberDuck in the data store. So all of that is there. It should be relatively easy to find. If you are missing anything, please let me know and we will help you get to it. The first thing you need to do with CyberDuck is actually download and install it, which I'm not going to do here. And then you have a second download, which is this sort of CyberDuck connection profile. So that's sort of like a bookmark. Now I already have CyberDuck installed, and this is what the window looks like. And in there, once I've configured it, and the configuration takes, all of 30 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and click on it to start. The bookmark will appear. So this is your connection to the CyVerse data store. You only actually have to set up that connection once, and then once you have it, you can connect to the data store and then transfer your data at will. In my experience, it probably takes around 30 seconds for you to go ahead and connect to the data store. But once you are connected, what you will see is a listing of the actual files that you have. Going back for just a moment while I'm waiting for that to the actual wiki instructions, on here are all the information that you need. So you'll see that there's about 2 or 3 different pieces of information that you need: the server name, the port, and then your username. You'll be able to do that. You can actually also connect to the data store without an iPlant or a CyVerse account, and those are described there. Okay, so it looks like I've connected. And what I'm seeing here is a listing of all of the files in my data store. Now, as a first-time user, if you were following along, obviously you wouldn't have very many things in there. You'd probably just have an analysis folder. But once you have whatever files or folders there, then to move those, you simply click on the file that you want to transfer and really just drag it over to where you'd like it. So if I drag it over to the desktop, what will happen is a new window will open and it will start a sort of transfer manager. So with here, I can see the history of any transfers. I can pause a transfer or restart a transfer, but essentially that will happen there. I'm happening over wireless. Usually it doesn't take very long to transfer something. It's just the very initial where it's sort of connecting, but it's quite quick. So we would expect that you should transfer on a really good connection about 100 gigabytes of data in about half an hour or so. The upload process is very much the same. So if I have a file or folder on my local computer, I can see if I just sort of find a folder. So I have a PowerPoint. If I moved it over there, and I want to move that PowerPoint onto a particular place in my CyVerse data store, I just drag it over into the CyVerse window, and then it would work. So as you see, all right, I've got my one file transferred. My other uploading file is in the midst of being transferred, but that's really it. Once you have it set up, it's really just a matter of dragging and dropping. You can see the history of what you've done, and it's just that simple. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let that work in the background. I really don't need that to go much further. What I'll do now is show you the next part, which is working at the command line in order to do that. So I'm going to go back here. Oh, it says I've already uploaded it, so I'll go ahead and override it. That's fine. If I go back to that wiki page or that Learning Center page here under Manage Data, the other thing that I'm going to mention is the iCommands. And iCommands is a set of command line tools that you can use. Again, you can be working with very large files. And the descriptions here, if you have a CyVerse account, you can go ahead and click on that. What you will have to do is download, whoops, looks like that has moved somehow. We'll have to update that. That'll happen after this. I'm going to go ahead, since I'm on the wiki, and search for iCommands. If that ever happens, by the way, especially since we're updating things, the CyVerse wiki is a great tool. You can go ahead and search for anything that you'd like. Okay, and with iCommands there, it goes through the things that you need. You need to actually download the iCommand tools. There they are. I will mention that the Mac and the Linux ones, I know work. The Windows ones have not been updated by the people who make iCommands in some time. So I've not really seen those work, except in some cases. Really, I would say iCommands is just for Mac and Linux. Okay, but you would come down here, and there's a couple of pieces of information that you need to configure, very similar in some way to the CyberDuck, that you have this one-time configuration step. Now I already have iCommands installed, so I'm just going to go ahead and open up a terminal. Here's one that'll be a bit easier to see. Okay, the very first time you start iCommands, you use the initiate command, or IINIT, and it will ask you for something. Since I've already done it, I'm just going to enter my CyVerse password, and nothing should happen. I should get back an empty prompt. Now, the list of commands, if you actually scroll down on the wiki, are all here. So they're very similar to what you'd expect for Linux commands like ICD or ls. All of those things really just has an I in front of it. Okay, so if I want to see the contents of my CyVerse data store, I can say ILS, and it will go ahead and list the contents. Keep in mind, as I'm running this, when I say ILS or ICD, I've already added those iCommands to my path. Please read the directions carefully if you want to do that, so that you don't have to actually execute the individual commands as they are with a /ILS. Okay, if I want to move some files, let's just do one quick demonstration. Let's say I want to get this VCF folders and put it on my desktop, so I can do an iget command. I want to do a folder, so it's going to be recursive. I want to see the progress. I want to have the time there and be verbose. And then I want to get .vcfs. I'm going to move that to my desktop. I'll hit enter. On my desktop, you can already see a VCF folder has appeared. And back in my terminal here, there will be the progress. So iCommands as well, you're expecting to get something like 100 gigabytes of data moved in roughly 30 minutes. Certainly there, the iCommands are actually intelligent. I don't know if that's what the I stands for, but it will look at the size of the transfer that you need, and it will just go ahead and do that. And again, since you have the output from the terminal, you can see the progress, the status. You can do checkpointing, you can do checksums, you can work with metadata, which I haven't talked about yet, but it's quite powerful. And for those of you who are very comfortable with the command line, it should be really, really useful for you right away. Okay, so let me go to the final part of working with this data demo, which is sharing data and also managing your data within the CyVerse discovery environment. Okay, so that is done. I'm just going to go ahead and put that aside. And now we're actually going to go, let me go to the CyVerse homepage again, CyVerse.org. Now we're actually going to go to one of the tools, one of the platforms for CyVerse, which is the discovery environment. So I'm going to go ahead and click there. And then I'm going to go down in the bottom where it says launch the DE and go ahead and select that. So this is the discovery environment, or DE. I do need to log in with my CyVerse username and password. I'll remind you, I'll try to make things bigger, but I'll remind you to make the full screen, do the full screen viewing of the video, see it. Now this is the discovery environment. In fact, it's opening what I've used last. I will go in a moment to really describe this in depth, but for the moment, let me just focus on data, and then I'll come back to actually giving you a little bit of a more thorough tour on the pieces that I'm missing. So first, let me go ahead and click on this data panel. The discovery environment, the sort of metaphor here is it's kind of like a desktop. So when I click on my data window, I actually have a folder, my username, and if I click on that, I see what I saw in CyberDuck, I see what I saw in iCommands, which is a listing of my resources, my folders within the CyVerse data store. Okay, there's some information like when was this modified. If I select a file, I get another set of information, like again details on the creation of the file. I have the size. I even have a checksum. So there's some interesting things there. What I'm going to focus on is actually sharing data. So let me show you two important ways to do that. The first way is pretty convenient, and it works to share individual files, not folders, but individual files, which could be zipped, which could be compressed. So I'm going to go ahead and click on a file that I'd like to share, and then I can really actually go to this little link icon that's there, or I could click on Share at the top and say Create Public Link. When I do that, I see some files. In fact, it looks like I've selected a couple things. I can select that file that I'm interested in sharing, and I can go ahead and click on Create. What it will do is create a link that I can give to anybody. They do not have to have a CyVerse account. If I go ahead and click on Copy Link, it will pop up. I can do Command-C, and now if I go to any window and go ahead and paste that in, then anybody who was looking to download that would get that dialog, and they could continue to download. Okay, so I can say OK to that. This is one way to quickly share data. Some recommendations, again, one, remember this is only going to work for an individual file. Number two, I wouldn't recommend that you use this for really large files. If you have files that are several gigabytes, very often something will happen. If the connection is interrupted, then they have to start transferring the file again. It can get messy. The other thing is that this is not secure. Anyone who has that link can download it. So if you put that link anywhere, you have to know that anyone who has access to it, there's no way to verify who has access, who forwarded an email, etc. So don't do this for files that you want to really control to a high degree who has access. Once you are done, or if you want to eliminate that link, you'd come back to the same menu in sharing, and you would just click this little delete icon there, and the link is now deleted. Anyone who would try to use that link again, it would no longer work. Okay, so that's one really easy way to share a data set. Now, if you want to actually do more than that, and you want to actually share an individual folder, so let's say I have selected a folder, and I want to go ahead and share that, then you can come up to the Share menu and say Share with Collaborators. This is more powerful. So I've got some files. It looks like somewhere else I've selected something else, so they're both showing up, which is fine. But this manage sharing with collaborators, I can share individual files, or I could share folders. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to search for the user. So this course means that our other user must have a CyVerse account. It's free. It didn't take too much for you to get one, I'm assuming. So you just search for them, and I'll search for a colleague's name. And as I type in their name, I can see the colleague, I can see their affiliation, I can say OK. And then I can choose what level of permission I want to assign them. Now, this actually goes back to some documentation I had earlier. This is back in the sort of the Learning Center. In fact, if I go down here, there's also a direct link to the CyVerse Learning Center and managing data. Okay, it goes through sharing data, managing data, and in fact, there's also a listing here in using this in the discovery environment, so you can go ahead and check that documentation there. But what it will take you through is, as you're sharing it, it will take you through what these permissions mean. I'm just going to summarize them by saying that to actually read means that this person can read the data, but they can't write to it. They can't alter any of the metadata that's associated with it. If they write, then they can actually go ahead and write to a file. They can edit some of the metadata. And finally, the highest level of permission is own. And they can do anything, including deleting or moving it. So if you do that and you're not careful, you may lose control of something. So you need to be careful on who you give what permissions to. But once you are satisfied that you have the people you'd like to share with and you have them assign the right permissions, you can click Done. Now, I'm not going to do that here. If I did click Done, I would get a notification that something has been shared. And literally under a minute, it should take for that person to have access. They'll also get a notification that they have shared it. Pretending that I've already done it, let's say that I open up this window again. So if I've shared something with somebody, I can come back here. And if I want to revoke permissions, I would just come and click that X. And then that would undo the sharing, and they'd no longer be able to access it that way. All right, so I'm going to close that. Files and folders that are shared with you end up being in this folder called Shared With Me. When you go there now, you'll actually see that you have several files or folders. That's because there are some files or folders that are shared with everybody. Some of them are community data projects or test data, but in there you'll also see things that were shared by your particular colleague or collaborator. If you go up to the notifications, if somebody shared something with you, it will also appear in that listing, and you could click the notification. It would take you directly to the endpoint, to the path. Okay? Those are the really basic things about sharing data. Some other things that I haven't covered, but I'll do quickly now in the discovery environment before we move on to actually analyzing data. I'll point out that you have the ability to do uploads and imports. Under File here, you can actually create new folders and files. That's possible. You can edit the folders and files. I don't have a lot of time to go into it, but if I have a particular file of interest, I could select that file and I can go up to Edit and say Metadata. This is a lesson all in itself, but if you are working with the metadata, you can either add individual elements of metadata. I'll kind of demonstrate that in a moment. You can apply different templates. If you're working with submission to the SRA, we handle that for you on your behalf, or you have some type of data that you are working with any one of the templates, or you want to use your own. That's a whole lesson, so I can't go too deeply into it, but what that empowers is the ability to search for data. So if I go up to searching, of course, there's a simple search for data, so I could search for a name of a genus, and maybe that'll pull up some files. But if you have your files annotated with metadata, besides searching that way, you can actually do this smart search. So you could search for, give me everything that has the genus Dioscorea, and then you click search, and then your searching can be much more powerful. So if I remember, I think that example will work because at some point I've used it. And then you would be able to really have a sort of more detailed search on the files and folders within your data collection. This one is taking a few seconds. It's looking through everything. Maybe it's a little bit sluggish, but you essentially get the point that you can come back here and do if I actually, if I had spelled it right, I'd have more success there, but you get the idea. Community data is a set of resources and data that everyone has access to. The other thing that you can do, there comes my search result, which I just poured over. The other thing that you can do is you can actually use this as a way to, if you have a laboratory or if you have a project, you will create that folder within your data store, and then you just give everyone access. And then as data sets come in or as analyses are done, everybody puts it into a common folder that everyone has the correct permissions to. And so it's a really fantastic way to share the data. And then there's no data transfer involved because it's all in one system. So you don't have to worry about paying the upload and sharing and transferring data penalty every single time you need to do something. You upload it once, and then once it's in the system, everyone can have access instantly. Okay, so let's go on because we only have an hour here. I need to show you how to analyze data with the discovery environment. Okay, so a couple of slides will take us into that idea, and then we'll keep moving along. Okay, so discovery environment, as we just sort of touched, it's a platform. You can run almost any type of bioinformatics application. You have it integrated with, as we just saw, the data, but also HPC, and you can add your own applications. We've covered the data window, uploading, downloading, sharing, or importing. And now we're going to talk about the other two menus that are there, which are the applications, where you have hundreds of apps. You can build workflows, you can integrate new applications, and you also have analyses where you can see the status of jobs, relaunch them, and have a detailed history. Okay, so let's go into the demo there. In this demo, we're going to do a really simple job, which is to take some unaligned DNA sequences in FASTA format and just do multiple alignments. So that's a pretty simple job, and it would be something that we can complete in a moment and give you an idea for how this thing works. Okay, so I'm already logged into the discovery environment. What I would do now is click on applications or apps. Got that open, so I could just make that bigger. So there are more than 415 applications. I'll also comment, besides these sort of general applications, which do lots of things, at the bottom there's also these high-performance computing applications. The very first time you use that, you have to click on it. It will take you to a sign-in. You'll go ahead and do that. But we're going to go ahead and search for an application. In this case, I said we're going to use muscle. And when we search for an application, we'll get a complete listing of all the applications that match that. I have a bunch of applications that I've edited, but mostly you'll see things like this. You may see applications in red, which means that they're there in our system, but you don't have access. We keep that for provenance. We're going to focus on this one, which is, you can see I favorited it, and you can see who integrated it. If people choose to, they can rate it with stars, which is great, but you don't have to. If you're not sure what the application is, you can click on the info button. You'll get a short description as a pop-up. And you'll have a link to a user manual, perhaps even some test data, more detailed information about the version of the tool. Okay, but that's essentially how the application catalog works. You just search for your application of interest. Make that bigger again. Okay. When you're actually ready to use an application, what you want to do is you want to actually click on the name of the application, and it will open up that application in a window. Okay, so all of our applications really look like this sort of wrapper. What you want to do is give your analysis a name. I can say this is a demo for the April 2016 webinar. And you have a choice of where that output for the application for the job will go. By default, it's analyses. If I was doing a project with a lot of people, I might want to change up here in preferences and choose for my application to be output to a shared folder. As you can see here, there are a couple of other preferences. I'm going to get an email when this is done. If I don't want that, I could change it here. Okay. But mostly, I really just need to give it a name. I really encourage giving comments. And then the menus here, these little accordion-style menus, are the things you actually have to fill out. So these both have an asterisk, so they're required. First one is I need to select a file, which I'm going to have as the input. So I'm going to go ahead and say Browse. And it's going to navigate to wherever the last folder was. I actually want to be in this one here, which is under Community Data, iPlant Training, and then this one called DE Walkthrough. And I want this file called DE Sample Plants. I'm going to go ahead and select that one. That's going to be my input. Now, this particular application, I love it because it only has a few choices here, so really nice for demo. I'm going to go ahead and say that this is DNA sequence. I happen to know that that's true. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Launch Analysis. When I click Launch Analysis, I will get a notification up at the top in a second or so that the analysis has launched. Okay? Once that happens, I can now go to this menu down here called Analyses. We've already got that open. This one was already open, so I may have to refresh it. Okay, so let's go ahead and click Refresh. and that'll take a few seconds. This analysis menu is a history, a pretty detailed history of all of the jobs that I have launched within the discovery environment. Up at the top here, you actually have the notifications, but here is really sort of this history that you can go through and see what's happening. So right now, that muscle job is in the status submitted. In a few moments, that'll go ahead and be completed. Now, for all of these other jobs that are here, I have some options. Number one, if I click on a job, like the muscle job, and I go up to analyses and I say, well, you know what? I want to see the parameters of that job. It'll open a new window. And in that window, I can see all of the parameters, what the outputs are going to be. I have a direct link to the file that I use as input. This is really helpful if your files start having names that are just sort of strings of alphanumerics. So I see all of that here, and I can even save that as a simple text file. So that's my job history. When I have a job that's more complicated, obviously it becomes more involved. So if I click on this top hat one and say view parameters, you could see that there's a lot more parameters. But again, I'll never have to guess what parameters I used, what was the individual file inputs. That's all there tracked for me. Okay. If I have a job that's running and I want to cancel it, I would be able to cancel it. If I wanted to relaunch a job, rather than clicking and setting a whole bunch of parameters, I can go ahead and click on relaunch. That application will open again, and then I'll be able to go through. In fact, my input data will already be there. Everything will be just as I left it, and if I realized, you know what, I should have made that a different value, I could go back and just launch the analysis without resetting a whole bunch of things as I would normally do in a graphical program. Okay, I saw that that is done. I have to click refresh while it's open, but I saw that the muscle job is done, so I'll go ahead and let it refresh. By the way, there's also a way in the share menu to share the job outputs, share that with your collaborators so that they can actually see what's going on. So that now has a status completed. If I go ahead and click on the name of the job, it will open up a data window, and it will navigate all the way through to where the output is. And again, this becomes important. Things sometimes get very similar names, but here I don't have to worry. So I can click on it. The output of my job is here with these files that are now in alignment. These are these sequences. Okay. So even though I really showed you a very simple job, all of the jobs within the discovery environment, all of the apps within the discovery environment basically work like that. They have a point-and-click graphical interface, and you can simply go in and adjust that. What I don't have time to show you are the ability to make workflows or integrate your new applications, but hopefully what I've shown you so far is enough to get started. Okay, I'll remind you again, haven't gotten any questions yet, but if you do have questions, please at the bottom, anytime, go ahead and put those questions. So we're now at the point for our very last demo, which is going to be atmosphere. So I'll take you through that, couple slides, and then we'll go ahead and do that demo as well. Okay. All right, so atmosphere. As I said, atmosphere is this access to hundreds of virtual machine images. You can really customize how you work with the software and compute. And again, it's integrated with everything. We find that a lot of biologists, as I mentioned, may be new to the concept of cloud computing. So let me just draw an analogy, because there's two pieces of jargon or two vocabulary terms you have to know. One is called an image. What is an image? And the next one we'll get to is what is an instance. So to understand what an image is, imagine that you bought a new computer and you want to go ahead and transfer everything from the old computer to the new computer. So you could take your files, your folders, your images, whatever, your data sets, and you could put them onto a backup hard drive. But rather than copying individual files or individual images or what have you, you can actually make something called an image. Now, an image is also a file, but an image is really sort of a backup of the entire system, the operating system, the preferences, really everything that you had on that computer. Now, if you take files, regular documents, images off of a hard drive, you get back the files, you get back the photos. But if you take an image file, you can actually make that into a complete clone, all the way down to the background that you had on your desktop. Everything is cloned. So that's what an image is. The operating system could be also including data sets. You wouldn't have to reinstall software. All of that is what's in an image. Okay, second concept is an instance. Okay, in the CyVerse cloud, We actually have physical resources. So we have disks, we have memory, we have CPUs, and what you request from us when you're using the Atmosphere Cloud is a certain amount of these, an allocation. So you know you need this much memory, you need this much disk space. So you take that and you additionally need to request from us an image, because a computer does need an operating system at the very minimum in order for it to work. But once you take them both, the physical resources and the image, those together become an instance, which is also known as a virtual machine. So this is a virtual computer that you can use, and it will reside at an IP address. So you'll need to get that IP address, and then you can access it. What are some of the features and even the use cases for this? Well, when you come to use the cloud, to use the Atmosphere, you can use our existing images, but you also can take a particular image, install some things, put some tools in, and then you can re-image that, and then you can use it again. So you don't have to reinstall tools every single time you launch a new instance. You can get up to 16 cores or 128 gigs of RAM. The important thing there is that there's an allocation limit. You can't get those resources indefinitely, and there's also, at any given moment, there may be more or fewer resources available. You can access all of these via the shell. In many cases, they have a desktop, so you can use what we're going to do. We're going to do them both. You can use this thing called VNC Viewer, and you can also share your images once you've made them with selected users, or you can even make them public. There's lots of use cases. Rather than having heavy analyses on your laptop or desktop, you can move them onto the cloud. You can run programs that have a GUI, so in the discovery environment, if something has a graphical interface, you couldn't run it there. You have full administrative or sudo access, so you can definitely install anything on your machine. Your instance is your instance. It's great for training and teaching. You can create an instance that's custom to you, and then you know that all of your students or everyone in your lab is working from the same computing format. And again, if you're developing software, that's a great way to distribute it. Okay, so let's do a demo where we're just going to talk about how to launch and connect. When you're connecting, in this case, you can use VNC Viewer for all of the 3 major platforms. If you're using Windows, you'll need a terminal emulator like PuTTY. Mac and Linux, you already have the shell or the terminal installed. Okay, so let me go ahead and launch the Atmosphere page. I can go back to CyVerse.org, close some of these unnecessary tabs. And from there, you're going to see, let me zoom out, you're going to see a link to Atmosphere. And from there, you have the Launch Atmosphere link, so you can go ahead and do that. When you launch Atmosphere, it will actually give you a listing of the publicly available images. You can search through them and see some of them are featured images. When you search for them, let's say you choose a topic like RNA-seq, any of those, you'll see different images that people have created. There is usually some type of description. Very often there's tags there with what tools are installed. So that's great. But actually to use this, you're going to have to log in. Now I'll remind you that actually Atmosphere access is not by default included in your CyVerse account. So if you want to have access to Atmosphere, you need to go back to where you signed up for your account. So that was back here in the CyVerse and then in the sign up link. And when you log in from the place where you used to sign up, just go ahead and log in, there'll be a link there under My Services, and it's all described, to sign up for Atmosphere. You must have a .edu or a .org email address associated with your account. Okay, if you have questions, again, please chat those to me. So back in Atmosphere, here's my Atmosphere dashboard. I can see what things I'm using. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to create a project. Okay, so I have several projects that are available. There are different things that you can do here. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I can create a project which is going to contain all of my resources. So I've already created one called Demo, and I actually have some instances there. But besides virtual machines, I could also have virtual hard drives, if you will, or volumes. I could have other images that I've made, etc. But rather than go into all that, I'm going to go back to the dashboard and just say, go ahead and launch a new instance. So when I say launch a new instance, it's going to ask me, well, what do I want to launch? I could choose this instance and say I want to launch it. And then this sort of wizard, if you will take you through launching it. So you can give your instance a name. There's usually some versions. If you have a project associated with it, you could say what project you'd like that instance to be part of. Then the provider is where this is going to be launched. For right now, we don't need to worry about it, but essentially there are various places where we have these resources. For the most part, you'll be working in the, initially in the iPlant Cloud down at Tucson. You can select the size of the instance, and again, you can't just choose any single size you want. It really depends on what you've used so far and your allocation and what's available. Okay, but I'm just going to go ahead and select a tiny one, and I can go ahead and click on Launch Instance. Now when I do that, you'll see I'm at this screen. It's going to go through a process of building, and it will actually take a few minutes, between 10 and 15 minutes, to go ahead and launch an instance. I have several already available. If I zoom in a little bit so you can see these are active, I'm going to go ahead and connect to them. So in order for me to connect, if I click on the instance name, I saw it before, but I also have the IP address. I'm going to use VNC Viewer, which is a download, which is referenced earlier. It's a free download. And you need to, if you're connecting with VNC, take that IP address and paste that into the VNC Viewer, along with the :1. Sorry, I can't make that bigger, but I just pasted that in with :1 and click Connect. It's going to ask me for my iPlant or CyVerse username and password. And then I'm connected. So this is a virtual computer or virtual desktop that's sitting in Arizona. I could do anything that I would normally do with a computer. So I can go ahead and say I want to, go on the internet. I could go ahead and launch, Firefox and open up Firefox. Probably you're not launching this in order to browse the net, but there are obviously other tools that are installed on this particular instance. So if I wanted to open up a genome browser or work with RStudio or look at some test data that's been installed, all of those things are there for me to use. Okay. The other way to connect to this is through the terminal. So if I open up a terminal, I'm going to clear this one that I used earlier, and I use SSH, my iPlant username at the IP address. I don't need a :1 here. I can hit enter. It'll ask for my password. The very first time, in fact, in this terminal and in VNC, it may ask you to confirm that you want to connect, but you get the idea. I have a question, so let me pause for a second. And the question was, is it possible to install some standalone programs, such as in Paranoid, in a user's personal space or their folder? So you can install, yes, you can install any type of software that you'd like. And then you can, let me scroll down here, I've got it too. Let's see the whole question. You can install anything you'd like. When you're running it, okay, the next question is actually several questions, which is fine. When you're running the program, so, okay, the question is, can you install, let me break it down. Can you install program on Atmosphere? Yes, you can install anything you like. We will only host it if it's open source, so if you're installing something and it's not open source, then really only you can use it. You need to consult the license of the software. The next part of the question was, when you're using that question, when you are using that software and you have something running in Atmosphere, can you use it and then close your computer? It depends. If I'm connected as I am through VNC and I start something in RStudio and I leave it running, absolutely it will continue to run and it will go to completion. If I'm actually connecting as I am right here from the terminal, I need to be careful. If I'm connected like this and I start a job, it will run, but if I close my terminal, then that will be it. I won't be able to, I'll actually stop the process. So I have to use a program like Screen or Tmux. I personally use Tmux, so I could say, Tmux, let's see if I remember, new session. Let's say the session is going to be called, RStudio. And I create that new session. Now, I'm in this sort of special thing where I can launch our studio, but if I close this on my terminal, the program will just continue. So it won't matter what you do there, it will just work. So hopefully that answers at least part of your question there. I'm just looking to see if I've gotten everything. Hold on one second, sometimes it's hard to see all the question. I'm going to make this bigger for you guys, so hold on while I do that. Okay, great. I think I have answered it, but please remember, please go ahead and ask me again if you have an additional part to that question that I wasn't able to get to. So you had also asked about working with a scheduler. We actually have some documentation there if you check the wiki, but I'll talk about how to get help in just a second because we're at the sort of the 1 hour mark and we're going to wrap up. But essentially I've showed you as you connect to any of these Atmosphere instances. Once you are done with that instance, if you're done just for the moment, you can come here and you can actually stop that instance or suspend it. You can reboot it if you need to. But once you're really done, you're going to have to actually terminate the instance. And let me back all the way up to the beginning. When you launch an Atmosphere instance, it's blank. It doesn't have anything other than what's on that original image. So it's not connected to your iPlant or your CyVerse data store. So the very first time you launch it, you're going to bring in whatever data sets you want from your CyVerse data store, use them, have analyses, have outputs. When you're ready to finish, you will actually need to take those and put them back onto your data store, or you could put them into a separate volume, which is described in the documentation. When you terminate your instance, that's it. So any data that's on that instance is forever gone. If you're working with your instance and your allocation runs out, then you can request more allocation, but in the meantime, it will be saved. It will just sort of stop the instance at that moment. So when you come back here, you're just going to go ahead once you're completely done, and you'll click on Terminate. There are a couple of other features, of course, that I don't have time to go into, but you get the idea that you can actually go and launch an on-demand machine that has some pretty powerful resources. So the very last thing we have time for is actually to say, well, where do you go from here? I'm going to stay on for a few more seconds for any questions, but in terms of where do you go from here, I had a slide, but I don't need to show it. Come back to the CyVerse homepage, and under Help there is a place called the Ask CyVerse, which is a forum. And in the user forum, you actually have the ability to ask questions and actually see more than 1,300 questions, it looks like, that other people have asked. So by and large, this is really a great way to get support. Of course, you can always email us directly, and then you'd be able to also interface with us and get some questions. But go ahead and ask it, and people in the community and also our own staff look and monitor and try to answer your questions. The last thing that I need to show, and then I'll ask for any last questions, is just a quick slide to acknowledge at least the executive team, but there are many more of us across the different sites. We are, as I said, a completely virtual organization. We're your collaborators, and we look forward to working with you on whatever your goals are to accomplish. So hopefully we've covered a number of things that you'll find useful. What's going to happen now that we're at the conclusion of the webinar is we're going to push you to a very quick survey, which we hope that you'll take and give us some feedback if this was useful. I'll stay on for just a few more seconds to see if we have any last questions, but if we don't have any here, you also should have my contact information, so you can also email me, and if there's anything I can help you with, that's wonderful. You will also get a notification when the video has been posted to YouTube, and you can go back and review any of this material. So with that said, I don't see any additional questions. Please make use of the forum or go to the Ask CyVerse page and follow up that way. Thank you very much for signing up for a CyVerse account, and we look forward to maybe even seeing you in person.